Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer. For this one, we're going to be going over the most powerful mage build for the late game, new game plus, and beyond. Basically what my setup is, where to put your stats exactly, what to use, and how to destroy late game bosses, some of the tougher bosses in the game, as a mage build. This is an entire setup that can destroy bosses fairly easily without going too crazy in the buff department, and also just have a really strong build and setup. I wanted to come up with something that was powerful but also easy to understand and utilize as well. Most bosses you're going to see it take just one try on Godfrey on New Game Plus 7 here. I like to utilize Night Comet with the dual staves of loss. That's my base build for this entire video, although we're going to go over a bunch of different spells in this one and different things you could do. But generally speaking, running the two staves of loss for the 60% boost on Night Comet does massive damage, can't be dodged by most bosses, has a ton of range, and it's chargeable to boot. This makes it really viable for most situations, and even when you're taking on bosses like Melania, Radagon, and such. I'm going to show Radagon in this video, by the way. Night Comet excels by a lot. It is definitely something that should be in your arsenal as a mage if you're looking for overpowered. And again, we're going to go over different spells in this one, but this should be your base build, your solid setup to take on the majority of bosses with ease. You can see on Godfrey here on New Game Plus 7, he can do a lot of damage to us, but we're not overly concerned with that because of the fact that we're able to dish out a lot of damage to him, and from a really good distance. As you can see, I'm constantly staying very far away from him and still putting out good damage. The buffs have pretty much run out at this point, and the damage is still good on Howl, as it absolutely destroys him. That dual boost for Night Comet is really substantial, and it's a solid setup for New Game Plus and beyond. That could take on most bosses, and you're going to see it chew through Radagon's HP as well as we go on and face him. And then there's going to be a longer fight in this video. By the way, everything's going to be timestamped as always with Elden Beast. He always takes a while. That's why he's not a lot in my videos. Not in my videos a lot. He just takes a bit of time, a fair bit of time. So it's something that I don't really include too often. People ask me about that. It's just Elden Beast is more of a stamina check and less of an actual boss fight. But for Radagon, same deal. We're going to go with Night Comet. We are going to use a different spell for Elden Beast, though, and we're going to go over that as well. This isn't something Radagon's going to parry, so you're not going to have to worry too much about that, and Night Comet is just going to chew through his HP. Keep your distance because you're going to have that ability to get distance. You can cast Terra Magika for the extra damage. Charge it when you can. Be careful because obviously he does hit a lot, spam a lot, but in the end, Radagon's going to go down fairly quickly to Night Comet. He's going to vanish, disappear in no time when you're utilizing a build like Night Comet, because it does a lot of damage to begin with, and even on New Game Plus 7, he's still a glass cannon build. So he went down fairly quickly to Night Comet, fairly easy there, not too much to explain, and we're going to move on to Elden Beast for a little bit of a longer fight. Now, Elden Beast, there's going to be a lot more running around for. There's going to be a lot to talk about here, but ultimately I opted not to go for the Comet Azur setup on Elden Beast, simply for the fact that he moves so often, so it could be difficult to set that up. I'm going to show my Comet Azur setup later in this video for you guys if you want to utilize that. But for the purpose of this video, I ended up going with Shard Spiral, which is great for larger targets. And by the way, I did make one mistake in this video. I ended up utilizing the Night Comet setup again, basically using the same staff for Shard Spiral. I meant to switch back to Lusat's and the Jellyfish shield. We'll go over that later in the video, so I lost some damage there. But generally speaking, if you're running a mage build and you have high intelligence, Lusat's is great with the Jellyfish shield and would have got even more damage out of Shard Spiral. With Elden Beast is 40% magic resistance, and he's pretty much immune to all, well, he is immune to all status effects and has 40% resistance to everything elemental. You'll still average between 3,000 and 5,000 damage per Shard Spiral. It is fantastic for larger targets. It can destroy them, and it has a decent amount of range too, and it actually goes through the target, doing damage as it continues through them. So it could do anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 damage per cast, and it works especially well on larger targets. It's something that I always have equipped. I always have Shard Spiral equipped as well as Night Comet. I'm going to go over my bread and butter too. I also use Adula's Moonblade for my setup, but basically everything in this video is going to have an entire setup for you, so you don't have to change too much, and you can take on any type of boss, any type of mob, or whatever with the same basic setup, pretty much destroying the game as a mage if you're in the late game, New Game Plus, or in this case, New Game Plus 7, it's going to make it a lot easier. And I know for a lot of people, Elden Beast is generally a pain, and this is no example of a quick fight. I think the part with Elden Beast is around 3 or 4 minutes in total, and there's a reason for that. Again, I always put him as more of a stamina check than an actual boss, simply for the fact that you end up running around from Elden Stars. There's a lot of different things you can do. Now, there is builds that can take on Elden Beast. You can one-shot him. I've one-shot him with ADLS before, but it takes a lot of buffs, takes a lot of extra work and whatnot. Now, as far as just a regular setup goes for a mage, Shard Spiral is perfectly fine for this. You can run Night Comet too and get reasonable damage, but given his magic resistance and the fact that it costs, I think, more FP, Shard Spiral is probably your better bet given the fact that he is a large target, and then you have that chance of it hitting for 5,000 damage. As you can see, I didn't even get a chance to cast Terra Magika, and pretty much all of the buffs had ran out other than Golden Vow, and I was using Howl Shabriri too. So if you're able to get Howl Shabriri up along with Terra Magika, you could probably hit for 6,000-7,000 damage with Shard Spiral as well. Again, you have to be a little bit close. It has to run through him, but it's a great spell for large targets, and it's very quick to cast too. You can charge it or you can quickly cast it. Either way, you're going to get a lot of damage out of it, especially when you're facing an enemy that it can go through in its entirety, because again, it damages completely as it goes through them. As he goes up here, more running around, I actually end up running into the wall, the side here, where I kind of got lucky. I ended up being able to turn very quickly because I would have gotten caught and hit there and might have actually gotten one shot from those rings. But anyway, he goes back to his regular moveset here, and then after his regular moveset, we're going to continue with Shard Spiral and try to finish him off as quickly as we can. And once again, it's a simple way to take on Elden Beast. It does take some time, but it's a fairly easy and effective way. It's one I've used before, and it's something I really like for the New Game Plus and beyond for mages. This is why I don't usually include Elden Beast in my videos, because he ends up being such a long fight, and again, it ends up being that whole stamina check deal and less of an actual boss fight, because it's not incredibly difficult, at least in my opinion, but it is something where you're going to have to run around a lot for most builds. Now, later in this video, I am going to show off buffs, builds, stats. We're going to go over a Comet Azur setup that can destroy the majority of bosses, but between Night Comet and Shard Spiral, you can take on any of the main bosses or larger bosses with ease with that setup. Just running those two, and then we're going to go over Adula's Moonblade for mobs, can absolutely carry you through the game, a New Game Plus and beyond for mages, with a really powerful build and make use of everything very, very easily with these setups. By the way, for those who didn't catch my last video, I have a new mic that I've been trying out for different videos. We'll see how far I go with it. I kind of been using it on and off, but it's supposed to have, I don't know, more noise canceling or HD or whatnot. It does make me sound a little bit different, but so far I haven't minded it too much. Anyways, he finishes off with his fire breath there, but it doesn't matter because he goes down, and we're finally able to take Elden Beast down using basically just Shard Spiral, and apparently not Lusat's staff and the Jellyfish shield, which was my original plan, and I'll talk about that later on because I would have gotten significantly more damage out of it, probably around 30% more, and that's what journey we're on. For people who are wondering, we are at New Game Plus 7, and we're going to go over mobs now and continue on with this build to show my powerful mage setup for New Game Plus and beyond. I'm going to show off the buffs later in this video, but I'm going to show you 150 stats where you'll be able to use these exact buffs, as long as you're not using the Comet Azur setup, which you wouldn't need the buffs for that anyway, but you'll be able to use Golden Vow and Howl Shabriri with my exact setup, because we're going to be using the Faith tier and stuff, and I'll go over that later, and you can increase your damage by 40%. And next up for mobs, I choose Adula's Moonblade. Between the frost damage, the wide sweep, it can absolutely obliterate the majority of mobs in the game, and it can clear out waves of enemies. Adula's Moonblade, specifically using Lusat's staff and the Jellyfish shield, we get a lot of damage out of it because the high scaling and then the extra 20% from the Jellyfish shield, and then any buffs, as you're going to see on screen here, as waves of mobs literally attack me, different enemies at gate front, they get absolutely destroyed by it. It's a great spell for mob control. That wide sweep, it has really good range, has that frost damage, and it's something you can utilize relatively quick too, and you can wipe out mobs with ease. It's something I also always have equipped. Frequently enjoy just running this. So this was another spell, third spell that I have equipped on top of Shard Spiral and Night Comet. We'll continue to go over that. Now for buffs, this is what I'm doing for this setup. We're going to drink our tier first, which has the Magic and Faith tier in it. Then we're going to cast Golden Vow, then Howl Shabriri, Then after that, we got 40% more damage from that. We can end up using Terra Magika if we want to in the Jellyfish shield, which will increase our damage even more, so at that point, why not? And then we get to use a whole bunch of different spells. Adula's Moonblade I really like. We can use Shard Spiral for those larger targets, as we mentioned, with Lusat's staff and the Jellyfish shield, and then we can switch back and use those dual Staves of Loss for that 60% boost, and we can basically use Night Comet for everything else. Make sure you cast Terra Magika, and you're going to get a ton of damage out of that setup. Let's get into equipment for this. For equipment, we have Lusat's staff plus 10. We have the 2 Staves of Loss. The one you're casting with, you're going to want upgraded to plus 25. The Jellyfish shield, any seal will do. We have the Spellblade set on. We have the Magic Scorpion Charm, and then we have kind of an open slot here. You can use Dragon Crest if you want some defense. You can use the Shard of Alexander if you're running something like the Dark Moon Greatsword, and then we have the Godfrey Icon, which will also work for the Dark Moon Greatsword, by the way, and Night Comet. Then we have the Graven Mask Talisman, Magic tier, and the Faith tier. Let's get into stats for this one. This is on my Mage, which is at level 200, and you can check out the stats and whatnot. I just want to leave this up here. I'm going to show 150 stats in a second to show what spells I'm using, but I'm using Golden Vow and Howl Shabriri for buffs and Terra Magika, and then I'm running, as I showed, Night Comet, Adula's Moonblade, and Shard Spiral. We're going to go over the 150 stats in a little bit. Now, before we go over 2 clips and everything you need to know about Comet Azur, that exact setup, which is a really powerful one, and then we go over the 150 stats and all that stuff, I want to show with buffs how powerful Night Comet is, even on New Game Plus 7, and how it can easily take on side bosses as well as main bosses, and it can absolutely destroy them and very easily to boot. You're going to see on the side boss here as we're facing the dragon how much damage she takes from Night Comet. I just wanted to show that off real quick for anybody that kind of has a question as to what they want to run as their main spell. Night Comet should be your main spell with the backups of Shard Spiral and Adula's Moonblade, and then obviously occasionally using Comet Azur, which we're going to go over as well. And as you can see, I ran away from him as he decided to rot half of Kaled. I wasn't interested in hanging around for that, but then we're going to move back, go back to our spot here. I think this ends up fading out anyway, but it doesn't matter because Night Comet's incredibly powerful, and it's going to be able to take on this dragon fairly easily. He's not too hard to fight, and he is weak to pretty much everything, but he does have a lot of HP. I think on New Game Plus 7, he's got 30-something thousand HP. Not going to matter too much, though, as we're running dual Staves of Loss. And again, we've got a ton of range, which makes it so much easier. It's very convenient and easy to do. And if he moves around, unlike Comet Azur, where they kind of have to be stationary, we can just move around with them, do a lot of damage, and take them down fairly quickly with Night Comet. Now let's get into the Comet Azur setups and go over that. We're going to show both Niall and Commander O'Neill. I always get them mixed up, but we're going to try the first one just using the setup I was using before, and then I'm going to show you the more powerful Comet Azur setup, go over equipment, everything you need to know for that, and then we'll show the 150 stats as well. Now for this, first things first, we're going to use the Jellyfish shield, do all our buffs, then we're going to cast Terra Magika, drink the infinite FP or tier last, and then we're going to cast Terra Magika, which is obviously going to do an insane amount of damage, and even without changing our setup from before, able to completely destroy him. And that was basically using Golden Vow, Howl Shabriri, and then we're using the Jellyfish shield, casting Terra Magika, and then drinking the tier last because it has the infinite FP tier in it, and we're going to show it on screen again here, and then show the Comet Azur setup. Truth be told, though, I use these 2 buffs for pretty much everything on New Game Plus 7 because everything's so tanky, but realistically, you could probably use the Golden Vow Ash of War and not even use Howl Shabriri and still get completely comparable damage and not have to worry about investing anything in Faith or using the Faith tier because we want to use the Infinite FP tier and the Magic tier. And then Commander Niall is going to get hit with all of this, and he's going to take a crazy amount of damage. And don't worry too much as the Knights come towards you. If you ever cast this on him, he's very easy to use Comet Azur and practice on. They'll get destroyed by it too, and you can see there he continued to take a crazy amount of damage. Let's get into equipment for this awesome setup. For equipment, we're running Lusat's staff plus 10, and then we're using any seal for the buffs. We have the Jellyfish shield, then we're using the Magic Scorpion Charm, Graven Mask Talisman, Graven School Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman, and then we have the Magic tier and the Infinite FP tier as well to run the really powerful Comet Azur setup that can pretty much boost everything spell related, and it does a ton of damage. All right, now let's get into the 150 stats we talked about earlier, and this isn't too complicated, but this will allow you to do those Faith buffs if you want to, if you're using the Faith tier with the original setup, And then if you're going to run the Jellyfish shield, you're just going to need 4 more points of strength to move around there. But everything else with those 150 stats, you're going to get completely comparable damage to this video, even on New Game Plus 7. Hope this video was helpful. It was informative for those for late game mage builds. I've had a lot of questions about it, but this is what I run. This will breeze through the game for you. It's going to be very easy using a setup like this. Running Knight, Comet, Adula's Moonblade, and Shard Spiral, and occasionally, if you want to, Comet Azur as well. Not on the Discord, definitely be sure to join that. There's over 500 people in there now. It's been an awesome community, and if you're not subbed and you love overpowered PvE builds, be sure to check out all the awesome builds that are on my channel. Thanks for watching, and as always, I will catch you guys there.